Hello, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. We'll be starting this webinar in just a few minutes. This is, I think, webinar 5 or 6 in our 2024 series, and we've got a few more planned in for later in the year, or the autumn as it seems to be now. But today we're talking about returning to work, and we've got Joanna from the Michael Page Group and Taylor, a stroke survivor, and they're both going to talk you through returning to work. This session is being recorded, but the only people that will be shown on screen are myself, Taylor, and Joanna. There's a chat function, as some of you have found already. So if you just if you want to say hi or say where you're from or what have you, general chit chat in the chat box. Any questions for Taylor or Joanna to answer, if you put them in the Q&A section, because they might get lost if you put them in the chat section. So put them in the Q&A section. And without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Joanna to start her presentation. Hello, Joanna.
Hello everybody. I'm Joanna McRae. I'm the D&I Client Solutions Director at Page Group. Quite a mouthful. Page Group is a global recruitment company with over 8,000 employees, and we have 9 teams globally who specifically help disabled candidates find work. So as you can tell, this is something that we believe in heavily, and we're dedicated to making a difference. So what does D&I Client Solutions mean, and what do my team actually do? So what we're doing is supporting our employers to create more diverse workplaces. And we can do that because everybody in my team across the globe comes from diverse communities. So I have recruitment consultants with physical disabilities who are neurodiverse, from different races, parts of the pride community, different ages, and a good gender split. And now that's really important because what we're trying to do is build trust with candidates who haven't had the most positive experience when it comes to a recruitment process. So how are we supporting these candidates? Well, one of the things that we do actively is build relationships with charities and associations, and we have 50 active relationships at the moment. This is great because it actually means then we can find new talents and individuals to enter into work. And that means that we are having to physically go out there and remove those barriers with employers to get them back into work. So the sort of services that we're actually offering candidates are things like CV writing, preparing you for the interview itself. So that could be around doing a mock interview with you, or just providing you with some questions that may come up in that interview process. It might be that we'll discuss with you reasonable adjustments and advise how best to position that to the client. Remember, you've got lots of clients who get very touchy when they hear the words reasonable adjustment. So it might be that it's just the way that we use our language and communicate those effectively. And then once you're actually in work, we believe that we must be there for you up to about a 12-month period. And we will then communicate you on a regular basis to make sure that you're happy, you're settled, and that everything that was promised before you started your role is actually coming true in the role. And we're there to facilitate that conversation with your new employer. So how do we actually support the employers? We do that by providing them access to talent that they wouldn't necessarily find. And I say that because not everybody signs up to job board adverts, not everybody joins recruitment consultancies. So if a client's looking for somebody slightly different or somebody with some unique skills, it's important that we go out for them and find that new talent. We also train a lot of recruitment teams or hiring managers around how best to support their diverse candidates who are coming into the workspace. And we educate them on how to make the interview process a little bit more inclusive. I think a lot of clients really struggle around that or feel that it's a really vast job. And actually, when we break it down to them, they go, oh, there was nothing to worry about. I just needed to make some tweaks here or there. We also make them aware around reasonable adjustments for the candidates, because I do feel that this comes up a lot. There's often a bit of a myth that if they start talking about reasonable adjustments, they won't be able to implement them. It's going to cost them a lot of money to do so. So having someone like ourselves to soundboard, use as a soundboard is really, really useful. So what is the role of us, the recruitment company, when we're dealing with clients? Well, the big role for us is to educate. We spend a lot of our time re-educating our clients and trying to get them to really change their mindset, allowing them to see that it is possible to hire a candidate with a disability. And then, as I've mentioned already, it's about how do you attract that diverse talent? What I need to be able to tell them about the talent, about all the things that this organisation can do to support them. We also encourage employers to make their recruitment processes, as I said, more inclusive. And when we talk about that often, it's not about saying, oh, we're going to just only look at candidates with a disability. We're saying to them, let's find the best candidate for the job who happens to have a disability. So it's a slight difference in wording there, but that's really important, because I don't think any disabled candidate wants to think of themselves as getting the job because of their disability rather than about their skill. So we're really emphasising that. And then we have lots of open conversations with our employers on what hiring difference means. What does that look like? Do you need to get special equipment? Do you offer flexible working hours? Do you have accessibility in all sorts of guises into doing that job? Because the purpose of us as a recruitment consultant is to make sure that any candidate that we place will thrive in their new job. And then the big part of this is when we've taken all that fear away from them, we can start introducing them to schemes like Access to Work. However, it is really, really important that I stress to you that it's a two-way street, this. We need our candidates to be honest and upfront with us. And I say that because often there's a little bit of gratitude when you're looking for a job. Like, oh, great, I've got the job, I'm just going to do it. Disabled candidates aren't the only ones who fall into that trap. You often find that with women. You often find that with people of colour. We become very grateful, and therefore we're not being honest about what we can really do in the time allotted to do the job. So things that I need to know if I'm going to support you better is the start time. What start time do you really need to be effective? There's no point if the company's saying 9 o'clock and you're not ready at 9 because you've got to take medication and you can start at 10, tell me. Let me make that adjustment for you at the forefront, at the start of the process. The hours that you can work. Is it more that you need to do split hours because you need time in the middle of the day to just relax and you need longer than an hour's lunch? Let us know, because you can always make that time up later, or you can start earlier from home. Also, tell us about how you're going to get there. It's really important. How are you going to travel in or out? Are you using public transport? These things are really important for us to know to set the scene for the client, and be open about the side effects about your medication. I have somebody in my team who has to have 2.5 hours off every day because of their medication. That's all right for me, because she adjusts her time accordingly. And then tell us about the equipment you need. The worst thing you can do for a recruitment company or a company when you're starting employment is to give us a surprise. We don't like surprises. We would prefer to know upfront, because the aim of this, especially from a recruitment point of view, is that we want you in the job a minimum of 12 months. So it's not just, you start and finish because it's not working. We want to make sure that you build a career and develop with that organisation. I want to now move on to Access to Work. Access to Work is an interesting scheme and concept that has been developed. It is a grant that funds practical support for disabled health and mental health conditioned individuals. And the aim is that it's meant to help you start work, stay in work, or be able to move into self-employment or start your own business. And the grant actually covers a multitude of things in order to help you achieve that. So it will start with things like specialised equipment. It might look at support workers. So it might be from a travel buddy to a job coach to an interpreter. It might be the cost of travel. So if you're not going to get public transport, but it might be around adaptation of your vehicle in order for you to get to and from work. It might also include physical changes to the workplace, or it might help pay for communication support at the interview. And I've had this as a recruiter where it supported somebody to actually perform in that interview. So it might be from an interpreter, which is where my candidate used it for, or for some other people, it might be around that communication support, maybe physical or mental health condition. But there are a few challenges with access to work, and I feel that it's really important when we talk about what it can give you that we just sort of discuss some of these challenges, because I believe that with all of these challenges, they can actually be overcome and it becomes less of a bane or a struggle to use the scheme effectively. So for employees, I would say that you've got to remember that you've got to be in work, or at least have a start date for you to access to work. So that's the first key point that I would really recommend that you remember. The second point for me would be that the employee is the only person who can actually apply for it. So it's not about you bringing it up with your employer or HR and then thinking that's it. You've got to finish that form because it's for you and the funds actually go to you. Now, Access to Work are talking a lot about the fact that it only takes maximum of 12 weeks. Well, when we applied for one of our employees, it took 18 weeks. I was speaking to a candidate last week and she's been at 18 weeks now and she's not heard a yes or a no. So that's pretty frustrating. That would be frustrating for you as the candidate, but it's equally frustrating for the employer who probably wants to get you started or help you with that adjustment in your work so you can thrive. The key to that frustration, I believe, is to communicate. So you have to remember to update your employer all the time, every time you hear from Access to Work. The other frustration that I can imagine or envisage is that we had to wait 18 weeks in order to support our employee. But being a big organisation, we were able to go out there and spend the money up front in order for that candidate to start work. However, not all the companies that you are going to approach or get a job with will have that capability or that cash flow. So just bear that in mind. Think about the support that they will need and the assurances they need, as well as what you will need from them. So it's a two-way street. Now, I think it's a really good time for me to introduce Taylor and bring Taylor back into the conversation, because Taylor has actually used Access to Work on several occasions. So Taylor, would you mind just introducing yourselves and telling us a little bit about your experience?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Joanna. My name is Taylor. I'm a stroke survivor. I'm 29 now, actually. I had my stroke at the age of 23. I had it the day before my 24th birthday in 2019. I worked originally in the NHS. I had the stroke while I was on maternity leave, and then I returned to work. That time I applied for Access to Work, I believe that was about 2020. So things were a little bit different back then. They were really supportive. They offered software, equipment, and they gave me a full breakdown I could then hand over to my employer, and they obviously got a copy so they could understand why they were giving why they had recommended some of these things. And the breakdown also included some training sessions to help my employers to learn how to deal with an employee who had struggles like I did. The total at the time was quite high. I think what's changed since I applied for Access to Work is the limit of the amount that they can spend on an individual. I wouldn't be able to confirm what that is, but at the time, I believe mine was at least, £9,000 worth of equipment, training, and this is Dragon software. This is a leg raiser or a foot raiser under your desk, ergonomical keyboard, ergonomical mouse, things to help me do the best that I could do. And I was working in governance at the time, so it was quite a stressful job. But unfortunately, that didn't particularly go through because I had to leave that job after having my PFO closure. So if anyone here in this chat today has had a PFO closure, I'm sure you can understand how difficult it can be to recover from them. So I chose to take some time off. It was COVID, and what happened after that is I joined a company called Adecco, and I'm sure lots of people have seen them. They are a massive organization, but they offer some fantastic support to their employees. And what they did is during the interview process, I was very honest and I said, these are the things I struggle with. I am working from home. Do you guys think you have anything? And they actually had someone within their team they could refer me to for like a disability assessment in a sense. So she was actually someone who spoke to me about what I struggled with, and then we were able to look at what she thought would be great, and then we were going to go ahead and go forward for the next stage of that. And she recommended a standing chair and a standing table, and some really, really fantastic recommendations in that sense. In that job, I was there for 3 months, and I had actually chosen to go back to the office. I will be very honest with every single person in this chat today. If you have been at home recovering for quite some time and you're going to return to the work world and go into the office, you need to be very honest with yourself about what support you need. You need to be honest with the people you're working with, and you need to be honest with yourself and your family or any of your support system, what you need help with, because there is so much support out there for us. And I know that every stroke is different, so I don't want to generalize strokes. I had mine at 23. I had right side brain damage. I've got left side mobility issues. But if you speak to me now or you see me in person, a lot of people completely forget that I've had a stroke, which is, I mean, sometimes it's great. Sometimes it does really play against me because I'm then basically so high functioning that it's like, oh, well, you can basically do whatever. But my things are like memory, processing large amounts of information. So some of our stroke issues or stroke symptoms are not always visible, and people are not going to look at us and understand that, because what I don't know if other people feel the same. What I've learned since having my stroke is there's not a lot of information out there for people who don't have a stroke. And that sounds silly because it basically means that anyone who wants to know about a stroke has to have someone close to them or has to have a stroke themselves to learn about it. And we've got this the STOP type of thing. They did used to do a few adverts and stuff, but people are learning as we learn, if that makes sense. And that's the way I pitched it to my next employer. And one thing I wanted to be very, very honest about here today is I did not take the initiative to apply for Access to Work when I first started the job. I wasn't aware that I didn't need their confirmation. You do need to communicate with them. Just like Joanna said, it's really, really important to communicate with your employer that you're going to apply for Access to Work. It's okay to not want to sit down with them and explain in depth what you think you're entitled to, because what if you're wrong? Do you know what I mean? But it is really important to let them know, my start date's coming up. I've applied for Access to Work. I'm not particularly sure what they're going to offer me, but I just want to let you know. Or if you're returning to work, I think a lady in the chat was just saying here that she's returning to her employer post-stroke. So for your employer now, Maggie, what you could do is you could apply for Access to Work, or you could have already applied for access to work to prepare you to return, so that you have this backing of support post-stroke rather than the support that you had before you had the stroke, because they're going to look at you as a fantastic employee and remember who you were before you had the stroke, but you need that support after having a stroke, because the things that you may struggle with when you attend, you might not know until you physically do them, if that makes sense. So if you've got a list of tasks for today and you're getting through them, but then it gets to a point where you're really tired and you just maybe need, half an hour just to kind of recoup, have some tea, but it's actually after your break time, having a conversation with them before you return to work and say, I do get bouts of fatigue and I might need to take smaller breaks in between. For me, I have to stand up. I lose the feeling from my knee down. So I have to stand up every so often, or if not, I have to be able to stretch. I need my desk to have, I don't know how to say it, but it needs to not have a backing so that I can stretch my legs.
Yeah.
Or I can kind of flex. I can't have anything that's too close so that my knees are constantly close together, because again, that's a struggle for me. So, when you return to work, do it with confidence, but remind them that you're learning as they are learning, because you can't tell them exactly what's going to happen when you return to work, but you can tell them along the way what is changing, if that makes sense. It's rather than coming in and what you've been struggling with in the time you've been recovering, but when it applies to work, you might need to say, hey, good morning, I'm returning to work in the next couple of weeks. I'm not sure how the stroke's going to affect me in work. Can we keep tabs on it? Can we meet every 2 weeks? Or, try and make it in a way where it's comfortable for you, but you can talk about it confidently. You don't want to be in a position where you create a sense of anxiety that it's like, oh, if I don't tell them, something bad's going to happen. You want to be able to say, do you know what? Today I noticed that this was a little bit more of a struggle than it was before. And you sit down and you say to them, do you know what? This is what I noticed. I'm not particularly sure if this is going to be long term, or if it's just for today. So then you can keep that open communication with them, because I'm 5 years post-stroke. And if I told you what I was struggling with when I first had the stroke compared to what I struggle with now, they're just miles apart. And they're just...
Do you mind, on that point, because it's come up quite a lot, that one thing that many people are struggling with is, how do you engage your employer that regarding the scheme, and what sort of advice would you give to how to do this? Because people sort of get very nervous about having this conversation. So is there any tips that you could give on how to do that?
I think if you have a support network around you, practice with them. It sounds a little bit silly, but I had to gain a lot of confidence before I could I can talk about the stroke, but I used to basically talk about the stroke in passing. So basically the person on the other end, I'd be like, yeah, I had a stroke at 23. And then I'd kind of be like getting ready to move on. And it didn't seem serious. So to the person listening to it, it wasn't serious. So what I started to do was I started to talk to my family. I started to understand also their perspective of it, and speak to my children, so that I could understand the overall view of a stroke. Because as a person who had a stroke, it's detrimental to my life. I'm like, oh my gosh, my whole life has changed. But to someone else looking at me, I needed to kind of understand how I looked to someone else, if that makes sense. So I think I can't tell you how to do it. Everyone in this webinar today, I can't tell you how to do it. But what I can encourage you to do is to talk about the stroke for your own security. I started a job in September 2022, and I did what I thought was the right thing to do. And I told them what I felt like was enough. And I asked them to, take documentation. I used to carry blister packs to work, and I used to ask them, is there anything that you need from me? And if you feel at any point that you are unsupported, I would raise that, because these people, they don't know strokes. They don't know you. They might have someone in their family. My previous manager had someone in his family who had a stroke, but his dad was 70 something. I'm 29. How I look and how I present, and how every single person in this chat is going to look and how they present, we're all different. So you need to kind of have, and it's weird to say to someone, you need to have the confidence to talk about it, because I know as a stroke survivor, how tricky it is, you know, and you get this, you build this anxiety because unfortunately there's a period of time where you get a very different approach from people. So you kind of are like, people just look at you as someone who needs to be fixed, or, you know, oh, poor you, you had a stroke, oh, you know. And when you're going back to work, you're doing it because that's what you want. So don't go back to work and lose that confidence. You want to go back to work. You want to regain your independence. You want to be the best version of yourself. But when you speak to them, even if you just pull one person aside at a time and build your confidence up. Don't force yourself. Yes, we are stroke survivors, but don't force yourself to be, you know, for everyone to understand it straight away, because you are learning and you need to acknowledge that for yourself when you go to work. You're learning. So how is everyone else going to figure it out? Or how are you going to inform people constantly? Do you know what I mean? Because in an interview, for example, if you're starting again and you're starting from scratch, in an interview, you can say, hey, you know, these are the things I've struggled with. I'm not particularly sure how they will affect me in work. How does your company fare with this? If you're not sure about a company, if it's a private company, they've got no history of working with disabilities, and you're a little bit uncertain, try to seek advice. If you're going back, like I was saying for Maggie earlier, go back, find your person. It might be someone who previously you might need to skip all of those people and go straight over to occupational health. You might not be comfortable with those people. You might need to go to occupational health, or you might need to get some support from your GP, where your GP assists you. Some GPs, I know they're a bit cheeky, they do charge you for letters and stuff like that, but they can also help you in understanding what you're entitled to and how that will affect you at work. If your GP is your person and you say to your GP, hey, you know, I'm returning to work, how do you think I should approach this? And they say to you, do you have a good relationship with your manager, or do you have a good relationship with your senior, you need to find someone in the management team. Your colleagues are great and your friends are fantastic, but the management are your key people when you're returning back to work. They have to understand if it's a physical mobility, if it's a physical issue, you need a risk assessment. You need a risk assessment to return to work. I have a walking stick every day, I need a risk assessment in every office. If someone's got visual, so they can't be at the screen for too long, you need that in writing, whether it's in email, whether it's you know, it's a hole in your contract. You need them to understand these, what are they called, reasonable adjustments. Look at me, I'm losing all my words. These reasonable adjustments are going to make you stay. Just like Joanna was saying, people don't want to get you into a job for you to be there for 3 months or 6 months. Everyone who's returning to work, they want to stay long term. They want to rebuild their career. They want to be able to move forward. So as difficult as it is to be honest about the fact that you've had a stroke, you have to do it to cover your back. And just to go on from this very briefly, and the reason why I say this with such passion is because I didn't do that. I didn't do that for myself. And I'm now out of a job that I was in for 18 months going through employment tribunal. And it's horrible. It is. I suffered generally with anxiety. I have all my life, and I've got other few issues, but this has been so soul crushing, because these were people that bought me a walking stick for Christmas. And honestly, if I showed it to you, it's stunning. It's a beautiful walking stick. They bought me a walking stick for Christmas. They welcomed me every day. They saw me come into the office with my walking stick every day. I constantly spoke about my stroke recovery. They congratulated me on my stroke recovery, but I didn't have anything written down, not a single thing. And that's why you need to be honest as early as possible.
Yeah.
Because you need to, and unfortunately we do have to do this, but when you fall under the disability with the Equality Act, you need to cover yourself, because we are going to keep falling under the radar, and we're going to keep being those people who get dismissed very easily. Oh, it's like that if we're not careful, because we don't know what we're entitled to. And these employers want to help you if they can, but if they can't, a lot of them would rather be very honest from the start. They don't like to, as much as we don't want to get given false hope, a lot of employers don't like to give false hope. So it saves two people there. It saves you from getting false hope for a job that you might not see all the way through because you might not be suitable. It might be because you can't do heavy lifting, or maybe they need someone. Everyone is looking for someone, and it's not that you're not capable or you're not worthy or you're not, it's because everyone is looking for something, and you need to be able to say, that's not a suitable job for me. I need to not look on Indeed. I need to go through Gov.uk. I need to look for disability confident employers. Or you need to go back to work and say, this is what I used to be able to do, but this is what I'm not able to do now. And your employer needs to look at you and confidently be like, I can help this person.
Yeah.
For yourself and for your sanity, for your mental health, because there's nothing worse than wanting to return after a stroke, trying to regain your independence, and then going, oh, I don't feel loved or I don't feel supported. Oh, my God.
Can I just ask you I've got 2 quick questions that candidates often bring up when I'm interviewing them. One of them is around, a lot of people get very worried or concerned about doing the application form for access to work. Can you give us a feeling of how long it actually takes to complete, and any top tips when you're completing that application form? And then we would love to hear around what's the actual assessment experience like? So when you get that call or the next stage, what is it like so people know what to expect? Because that's the thing that I've only had it from an employer point of view where they've asked me a couple of questions, but nothing more. So I wanted to understand from your side.
So the access to work form, I think everyone should do it with someone. I was so angry at the time, and I'll be very honest with everyone in here. I was so angry at the time because I'd begged my employer for access to work, and I didn't realize I didn't need their confirmation. So when I'd applied for it, I didn't do it with the right headspace, if that makes sense. I did it out of, I'm so annoyed. Why? And I could have got a lot more support in the way that I filled it out. So I think what I did with mine is I gave too much vague information. And then really, how can you work with vague? And I think what happened, by the time I got my callback, obviously I was out of work, so it was a little bit unfortunate in this situation. But when I had the first one at the NHS, I had support from my mom, and she was just able to kind of get rid of a little bit of the unnecessary information. I don't know if anyone's similar to me, but I tend to overtalk. I'm a chatterbox. I will do blah, 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 and give you my whole life story, but you've asked me a question and I've missed it. So I had support from my mum, and I know not everyone has a support system, but they do have Citizens Advice sometimes can give you some support with those. They're really good at being very very focused on exactly what you need from access to work. The form itself, you can do it online. It's asking you lots of questions about how you need support, what it is you struggle with, and how you think that you can benefit from access to work. So you can apply, I believe, on behalf of someone. I think the process itself, I'd say it takes about 30 minutes. But being the type of person I am, it took me about, 30 to 40 minutes. So I would say always plan yourself about an hour so that you can make sure that you read back on every question and you feel confident in the way that you've answered. My wait time was a little bit longer from by the time I got the call back. But the processing time, like Joanna was saying, may have changed because a lot of people are now more aware of access to work as well. So they've gone from maybe a 12-week to maybe 18 weeks. But I think the best thing you can do while you are waiting, if it does take a little bit longer, is to keep taking notes.
I'm just going to jump in there. I've had a conversation with Access to Work, and what they're desperately trying to do at the moment is recruit more people. When it was originally set up, the people on the phones doing the assessment calls were all civil servants. They've scrapped that now because of the volume of applications. So they're just getting lots of different types of people to help support that. And what they're trying to do is double the size of that operation. So, I was still surprised to hear last week that it's still taking 18 weeks for someone to get a call back. But I'm hoping that that's just teething problems because they're having to train people up and those sorts of things. But carry on.
I mean, we just want to manage our expectations a little bit. I don't know how some other people feel when they return to work, but you're so excited. you're so excited to be present, that as you're trying to get everything all organized, you get this little bit of anxiety of like, you know, maybe I'm not entitled to it. And you kind of talk yourself into how you're not capable of being back at work when you're more than capable and with the right support. But I think when you do these applications, for anyone here today or anyone who's going to listen in future, you have to remember that it is going to take a while. It's not going to be an overnight process. And when people say things like, you know, we're going to get back to you, or can you expand on that? Sometimes going away and just looking online, sometimes doing a little bit of research, and I said this before we came into I don't want it to come across as harsh, but you are going to have to put in the work. And it sounds so horrible to be like, oh, you stroke survivors, put in the work. I'm 29, I've got 2 kids, I can't clean my house properly, I can't lift heavy bags, I can't do my shopping. I could have stayed in a very like straight place of like severely depressed, and it's easy to do after a stroke. But when it comes to work, I said, you know what, I'm going to try. And I remember, because I worked in a job, it was a COVID-19 NHS, one of those silly jobs. And it was one of those companies who were just trying to make money. And I said, you know what, I will find somewhere, because there are employers out there who are willing to be supportive of you. Look at me now, I forgot my trail of thought, why I've even spoken about that.
I was going to say, how was the actual assessment? So when they call, what's that like?
Yes, sorry, I was literally trying to use that as an example to reach there for a reason, but forgotten. The assessment itself, they are really understanding. They're people who speak to people all the time. They are people who are dealing with people. It's not quite like PIP. I'm sure everyone here knows how horrible that experience is. Not quite like PIP. You don't need to think of it as quite harrowing. They're not trying to rule you out. They're trying to actually listen to you and see if they have what it is that you need. So they'll say, hey, how are you? Do you need any assistance today? And they're very, you know, even when I spoke to the lady when I was out of work, she was still very understanding. She could tell I was frustrated. You know, it's not, I wasn't disrespectful or anything like that, but she could tell I was a bit frustrated. She was like, you know, I do apologize for the way things have gone. This is the advice that I can give you, la, 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 la. And they are willing to be of help as long as you know what it is that you're coming there for. But you're not going to know everything. But if you know that you want to return to an office job and you might need a seat raiser, you need to explain to them how that's going to help you, rather than, do you know what, I need a desk and I need this and I need that. And they're going, oh, why do you need that? And you're kind of sitting there going, oh, I just do. Because unfortunately, you know, funds are still within a sense limited. They're not asking you to know everything, but they are asking in a sense to come a little bit clued up. So you do need to do a bit of research before these access to work appointments. Or if you need the assistance and you don't have it at the time, I would try my hardest to because you know how it gets. Sometimes it might say it's 2:30, it might just be 5 minutes later. Try to make sure that anytime you're scheduled in for a call, or if you need reminders, they're very open to being supportive. So I would never close your mind off when it comes to the assessment that it's going to be a horrible experience. Have a positive mind and go in with a positive attitude, and you will get that back from them.
So my final question to you then. So what have been the positives of the scheme that you've seen and experienced?
A positive.
What's been positive about this experience of going into using access to work? Is it the people? Is it the way they listen? Is it that they gave you what you needed?
I think it's both.
Because it has a bit of, the reason I asked that question is access to work still is, you know, not everybody likes it, not everybody trusts it, not everybody wants to use it. So I'm trying to leave everybody with some positives so they go, you know what, I'll do the application form today.
Sorry, I just saw Sagar's message. I totally understand. I totally understand for PIP. That's why I wanted to use that as an example, because I know quite a lot of people dread the PIP conversation. I think 2 things. It was the people, but it was also the reassurance. Because when I had my first one at the NHS, if she hadn't have given me the reassurance and the support, I don't think I would have been confident to go again. Or I don't think I would have been confident to try again, in a sense, because I would have been like, if the first experience was so negative, I would have been like, well, I might as well do it myself. I might as well spend the money. So the first, honestly, and I did try to find the wad of paper. I was offered 2 training sessions for my, sorry, 2, I forget that. I'm so sorry. 2 training sessions for my managers, which it would have been the senior managers and also the kind of team leaders. So it didn't just limit the knowledge to my managers. It was going to sort of allow my team members as well to know more about me. It was Dragon Software, the ergonomical keyboard and the ergonomical mouse, as someone who has pains from the shoulders down, taking the pressure off of my wrist. And it was just really nice for someone to say, do you know what? We do have something that can help you. We do have something that can get you to either stay in work, start work, or keep going in work. And I think that's what got me more confident. So Dragon Software Dinner is when you speak to your computer and it types it for you. It's similar to Transcribe on Word, but it's specifically for people with dyslexia or any type of disabilities. And it's a way that you know, if you were to minute meetings or, you know, you needed to take notes on something, you could speak and it would type it for you. So in a sense, you would never not have access to being a part of something in a team. I also think that the access to work, what access to work does in general for people who are scared, because I don't know how a lot of people feel in this room in the chat today, it's very scary. For me personally, even though I was young, it was very scary to return to work because I wasn't sure if the world was ready for me. I know the world is ready for a lot of disabilities, but I wasn't sure if the world was ready for me because I don't think I understood, you know, how I was returning. But when I listened to, you know, the standing desk, she was like, you know, you can stand up and then you can sit down and then, you know, you can lift it up, that desk, and then, you know, and it was so interesting because when I go online, you can't go online and search stroke related equipment. You can't go online and be like stroke da 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 da. It doesn't work like that because, as we've all said, it's affected us all very differently. I'm right side dominant, but I was left side affected. But I hold my walking stick in my right hand. But then I got an injury to my right arm last year. So now I'm right side affected by accident. So that's something I didn't start with. But if someone was to assess me now, I would be very intrigued to know what else they could offer. Because when like I said before, when I did my last one in December, unfortunately, I had lost that job. So I wasn't able to continue to apply for access to work, which is why she advised me when I get a start date or whenever I know I'm starting a new job, I can reapply. But yeah, it is positive. If you can make anything a positive experience, but if it's what you want, access to work is a great way to feel a part of the team, but also supported in a way that your company might not be able to do directly, is the best way I can say it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Joanna and Taylor. We've got quite a few questions have come in, and we've got a few that came in when people signed up for the webinar. Some are access to work questions, some are just work questions. So we'll just start at the top and work our way through. So excuse me if I look like I'm reading, I am reading. Right, the first one, I was made redundant in March 23 and had a stroke in the same month. I used to work in the city and cannot find a job. How do I start again, aged 46?
I'll take that. There's a few things that you should be thinking about. Realistically, do you want the same job that you had before, and can you actually do it on the same, you know, as effectively as you did it before? And I think that's not a bad thing, to be honest, around that conversation. But also look at your CV. Start creating a CV that is more around skill-based rather than experience. So what can you do and what can you do really well? That's what clients need to know. Is it that you're building relationships with clients? Is it the fact that you are can't think of another skill at the moment, but do you know what I mean? If you go down that route, it opens up your opportunities and you become less linear. The other thing that I think people need to start doing is looking for those organisations that have committed to disability confidence. Because the rule is with those employers, they should see you for an interview if you've got the skills. So that's about building your confidence back up. And then you can have those honest conversations with them and start getting your groove on how you do that and how you position it. So then if you see something further down the line, you've got the confidence to be able to have that conversation with the employer. Also look out for specialist recruiters, people like myself who've got a team who do this day in, day out. We're here to support you. And like I said, we can give you the tips on and how to position things in the interview, how to answer the questions. But I think the first bit is, do you want the same job? And I think you've got to have that honest conversation with yourself at that starting stage. And then it gives you that ability to have that honest conversation with the employer about what you can do and what you've been doing in that time that you've been off. I hope that helped. I'm just going to answer something else actually that I've just seen in the chat by Carmen living in Mexico. What I'm seeing at the moment, because my job is a global, is there's a lot of organizations out there who, because they have offices in quota-driven countries around disability and having employees with a disability, unfortunately, the UK is not one of them. You're seeing a lot of global organizations, the L'Oreals of this world, big banks, having dedicated programs to increasing the number of disabled people that they employ. The reason I bring that up, in Mexico, L'Oreal in particular are doing a similar program. So it's probably worth you looking at your big multinational organizations who are tackling gender as diversity for one of their targets, but also disability is coming up as a second importance. So I would try and look at your big multinationals.
Thank you. And I'm glad you picked up on that question as well. Right, we've got several questions that sort of all roll into each other. So the first one is advice for managing post-stroke fatigue while working or studying. How do you ask for reasonable considerations like extra time on tasks? So that could be related to fatigue levels, or it could be the processing times that somebody has got now. How do you tell people that you're struggling with the fatigue and depression, stroke, anxiety, which Taylor's touched on? And again, this has been touched on, should I explain my condition to everyone in the workplace, worried about negative comments because of my memory and processing time? Now, I'd just like to say, I know a lot of people do a little presentation to their work colleagues sometimes to explain what a stroke is, because the information is not there, like Taylor said earlier. They do a little presentation to sort of get it out there, what they're actually going through and what they need and what affects them. But I'll hand over to you two now.
I'll just jump in quickly. On your positioning stuff, try and be positive. Because I think if you see it as a barrier and a hassle and a difficulty, then you're projecting that on us, and we now believe it's a barrier and a difficulty. Someone's written here, as Carmen again, about, you might work slowly. So you talk about, I'm a person who has attention to detail. And therefore, because I've got attention to detail, I like to recheck and double check my work. Is that a problem? Does this job mean that I have to work at pace? So think about then what sort of equipment you would need to help you work at pace. Or is there any at all? It might not be. So ask about, what are your deadlines like, employer? Is it that they need things turned around within 24 hours? That gives us time. If it's within an hour, it might be slightly difficult. So then I might need adjustment around equipment that I'm using, or Dragon software to help me do that. Do you know what? So I just wanted to touch on that, because I feel that if you came in front of me and said, and remember, people without disabilities also are sometimes have those worries about how they're going to perform in the job because they've had periods out of work. It's about how you turn that slight worry into a positive, and how you position how you can make it positive in the workplace.
Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree with Joanna. I'm just going to dip in and just say, in regards to fatigue, depression, anxiety, we know they all go hand in hand. So it's one of those things that, again, I'm sure mental health, in, you know, we're very blessed in these days where we're discussing mental health more, we're more open about it. So people do know more about it, but it doesn't take that kind of fear of being judged. But the only honest thing that I can say to each and every person who's going to watch this webinar is you have to do what's comfortable for you. We can sit here and say to you, go and do this, go and do that. But you might be like, that's not going to work for me. I don't think I can do that straight away. I might not be able to do a presentation. I only have one friend at work, but that's okay. You have to do it in a way that works for you. What I did the first time was I was like, hey, you know, I had a stroke. It's not really a big deal. Okay. The second time I was like, hey, I've had a stroke. It's not really a big deal. The second job that I took on was such a heavy job. So what I did was I went into a governance, that's the other job. I went into a care role, and I basically was managing about 60 care packages. And at the time, it looked great. Do you know what I realized? I hadn't got over the fact that I had a stroke. So when I saw someone else who'd had a stroke, I melted. That's the best way I can put it to you. I melted because I wanted to give her everything. All she was saying to me was, I want my independence. And I wanted to give her everything. So if you're in a job that requires a lot of face-to-face interactions, or it requires a lot of emotional support, you need to think about your own health as well. You need to think about how you're coping on a normal day without the job, and how the job that you are doing is going to impact. When I took on that care job, I didn't realize I was emotionally drained, not because I was incapable of doing the job, but because I was still addressing the fact that I'd had a stroke. So when I'd met all of these older people, and sometimes they hadn't had a stroke, they were just older people, I had this kind of like, oh my gosh, if you die, what's going to happen to you? Because I was still kind of in that phase of my stroke where I was coming to terms with what had happened. So what I didn't do for myself was I didn't say to myself, this is too heavy for you. I came in full guns blazing, not very positive. I just thought I can do anything. The second time I was a bit more honest, and I said, hey, I'm really good at A, B, C, and D, but this is not where I'm good at. And my colleagues introduced me to, I don't know if everyone, I didn't know about it at the time, they've got this thing on Word called Notes. And then I was like, how about I get something like this? I don't know if anyone can see it. It's just one of those weekly planners. And as I started to talk to my colleagues more, and I started to, speak to them, I actually worked with someone who had ADHD just like me. And just through conversation, we ended up realizing that we both had ADHD. And, it's not a stroke symptom, but sometimes involving yourself in those conversations opens you up. Some people have had family members who've had strokes. So you might, if you go in, just like Joanna said, if you go in with the negativity of, no one's going to understand me, they're not going to support me, you're going to give off that energy, and they're going to feel that from you. And then it's not going to be the type of maybe it's the first impression, second impression. It's not going to be the impression that you want. So I know it's difficult when you're dealing with depression, anxiety, or any type of mental health to be positive constantly. But if it's what you want, you have to kind of say to yourself, I have to do it for me. I have to do it for the support for myself so that I can get this career on the road. And I have to do it so that my employer also knows what I need. Because if you have a down day, I take blood thinners. I don't know if anyone in here takes clopidogrel as well. I take clopidogrel every day, 75 milligrams. If I don't take the clopidogrel, I wouldn't be able to have this conversation with you today. I can't process my thoughts. And I've been to the doctors about it. They can't figure it out. They don't understand why, if I don't take a blood thinner, I can't function. Because I slur, I've fallen over so many times when I'm not on my blood thinner. And if they don't know that about you, how can they help you? Because it's not just your physical. You have to remember, if you're on any medication, that's going to impact your day-to-day life if you don't have it. If you've got any mobility aids, you need to know that it's safe. You need to know that it's, if I use a walking stick, I had to make sure I had somewhere to put it so that it wasn't going to trip over the candidates. It wasn't going to trip over my colleagues. If you have it's not a Zimmer frame, but I think it is, isn't it? when you push.
Yeah.
Or I think one of the ladies here was saying her husband has no mobility in his right. If he has a trapped, say for instance, there's some people who end up post-stroke like this, or they leave it like this. If that's how he is every day, they need to know. You don't want them to look at you and say, this is your problem. People look at me and go, I hope your leg gets better, because they think I've broken my leg. You don't put yourself in a position where you make people guess how you need the support. Put yourself in a more positive position, as Joanna was saying, where you openly are coming and saying, this is what it is. Maybe not a presentation, maybe come in and have your different strokes top on, maybe come in and have a leaflet, maybe pull someone aside and say, how do you think I could approach it with my team? Maybe in a team meeting, say, hey guys, haven't seen you in a while. I really just want to update you on something that's happened to me. I promise you, the worst thing you can do is not talk about it without going into.
I agree with that. And I was going to say, I think you've got to remember you're in an age of flexible working, and where most companies are talking about being more inclusive. We're also in an age where we don't have as many people to create workforces. So a lot of organizations have had to become more flexible and have to become more inclusive to find people to do the work, really. So use that to your advantage. That's not a negative. So you go in and dictate now what it is you need to be successful, and don't apologize for it. And I think that for me is really important, that candidates do that. I do that as a mum all the time. I leave early because I have to do pickup. So why should it be any different for you? And I think you need to remember that.
Yes, your power is in you. I know that I'm sure a lot of people on here listen to Carol. We love Carol. And I'm sure if we shared Carol with Joanna, Joanna would feel the everlasting spirit of Carol. She's just a ball of light, Joanna. And she comes in the group and she explains what happened to her. And she was DJing. She does some of the most amazing things. And she comes in that group and she says, this is what I've done today. And it might not be that you go straight back to work, whoever's in here or whoever watches this. It might be that you do a small work from home job and you just get into the swing of things. But again, as Joanna said, there's flexible work in there. Don't feel that we're still stuck in the age before COVID. A lot of people work from home. There's people who, when I was doing my apprenticeship, I never met my mentors. I never met a single one of them. They all work from home. You can still educate. You can still be a part of the community. You can still be the best version of yourself. Just like this lady who was asking about her husband, who's a lecturer. Say, for example, he being a lecturer, say he starts off doing it webinar-wise. Say he does it virtually for a while. And then gradually he goes back. You never know what that university or that place of work is willing to offer, because his skills are valuable. Do you know what I mean? Don't think because you've had a stroke that you're no longer valuable. You are just as valuable as any other member. And when you look for a job, go to Gov.uk, look up disability confident employers, rather than putting yourself in a position where you're constantly trying to figure out if they're disability confident. Search where people have this lovely badge. And they've made it for people like us on purpose. They made it colorful, it's there. And every website will have disability confident employer on it. Make it easier for yourself. Talk to people, find out if you're starting a new job, if they have occupational health. The job I just came from didn't have HR, didn't have occupational health. What was I doing? Do you know what I mean? I didn't actually have a support network. Ask the questions that you need to stay in that job. And if you need any support, the DS group, not to be funny, like I said before, some people don't have massive support groups, but what you can do is you can come into the group in different strokes and people will be willing to answer your questions, because there's tons of different types of people in there who've done tons of different types of work. Rahel has someone who helps people. She's actually, I can't remember. Oh, I wish I remembered, but she said to me, Taylor, I'm at home. I use a wheelchair. I can't remember what her disability is. And she helps people get back to work. But I bet you a while ago, someone would have told her that she's not going to go. Do you know what I mean? The negative side of things would have told her she can't go back to work. She was the most amazing support. She upped my CV. She offered me a couple jobs that I could do. And she was someone who had a disability. So there are thousands of people just like me and you and everyone in this chat who are working. So have that confidence in yourself. Be positive about being the best version of yourself. And if it starts with work, fantastic. If it starts with a work from home job or it starts in a bookshop, do it, because we as human beings are more than capable of achieving anything we put our minds to. And this access to work is an assistance for you to keep going. And just like Joanna said, she's coming from Michael Page and she's saying people are coming to her. So if you're coming and you meet someone like Joanna, be as honest with them as possible, because Joanna and people like Joanna want to help us as much as we want to help ourselves. So try to be open to that help. Sometimes it's easy to be closed post-stroke. First 2 years, no one could help me. Try to be open to it. Try to be more positive about it. Try to be positive about yourself, because that depression, anxiety, the fear, the PTSD, maybe for some people, I had my stroke by myself. There's a lot of fear about being by myself. I get a lot of anxiety about that. Talk to people. If you need support, talk to people. If you don't know what support you need, I'm sure there's someone out there who'd be willing to explain their experiences, which may help you to understand more about what you might need. And that's it. Sorry to go off.
But we've got a few questions about access to work. Fiona's asked, for the more hidden difficulties that we may experience, were access to work able to help and understand? Were they able to anticipate and suggest things that you might not know you need? Taylor,
that's you.
Oh, that's me. Sorry. Let me just read that again. More hidden.
They do make recommendations, don't they?
They do.
They do
Fiona,
suggest equipment to you, or have you thought of, because when they're assessing and you're giving them what your difficulties may be or worries are about doing work, they'll come up with ideas and solutions around that.
Yeah.
So they're very good at making you aware of equipment that you might not have heard of before.
Yeah, I was saying to Joanna actually and Sheila while we had a couple conversations for this webinar that a lot of people know Dragon, but what if there's a new software that's better than Dragon? What if there's something out there that people just like us in our normal day don't know anything about, but because access to work are obviously offered this type, they might be, when you speak to them, I think someone asked if it's over the phone. I've never had a face-to-face access to work appointment. Everything's always been over the phone. But in regards to that, when they speak to you and they listen to you, they might have suggestions that no one here would know about, because that's what they specialize in. They specialize in pairing suitable, it could be, like we said, equipment, software, tables, chairs, they are there to pair it with you, because again, what I might struggle with might not be what you struggle with. So they might say, someone with this might need Dragon, but actually you might need, and they'll let you know. So I'd, again, just be very honest about what your day-to-day struggles are, and then reflect on how you think that would impact you at work.
So that kind of answers Daniel's question as well. What help is available to help with memory and fatigue? How does Dragon help you in your day? Talk to Access to Work and see what is available now, because Dragon has been out quite a few years now. So as Taylor said, there might be something new.
If you have, I don't know if anyone here is a little bit into vitamins and natural remedies. I use lion's mane. I don't use lion's mane and black pepper. It's not what I use. There's a company called the British Supplements Company, and they provide loads of natural vitamins. And I've used lion's mane for memory, and I used it while I was at work. And I can't tell you anything from your that your doctor would give you, because they've never suggested anything for me. But I used lion's mane to help with my memory. And there's a lot of studies around it. Feel free to do some research. It's a natural, it's literally a mushroom. Literally a mushroom.
Everybody's so individual,
Yeah, So that's why I say you have to do your research and find something, because your GP might not suggest something, but again, you might need, the GP didn't tell me about Lion's Mane. I did my research and I found that Lion's Mane worked for me. So there's going to be some things when you return to work where you might need to do a bit of trial and error.
Okay, just very quickly, because I know time's getting on. Is access to work reviewed after a certain amount of time?
In what sense?
It's meant to be, yeah, you can go to access to work for every change of job, but also they're saying that actually you could go every year if your job or increases or your disability gets worse. So I think the new ways of the scheme is it used to be every time you started a new job, but now I understand you can go yearly.
Okay. And any experience here of supporting people with aphasia back to an existing job that involves interacting with lots of people and attending lots of meetings? Very understanding employer, practical tips, ? So I suppose it's investigating things like possibly dragging software and what have you, and those type things that could fill in gaps that you might have.
Yeah, but also get into the habit of asking to record every meeting. It's a simple thing that organisations are happy to do as well. So if you can't attend or your attention span's not there, you've still got those notes to refer back to if you miss any of it. Now, that's something that you can ask for and it's not a big deal, you know? So start to ask for those sorts of things.
There's Josie said about a dictaphone.
Yeah, you can do that on your mobile.
Because I think someone else was asking if they would have to basically tell the room.
Yeah.
It's been such a long time since I've used a dictaphone, but I'm sure companies can also provide you with some, so people don't actually have to spend their own money and they have a company one because it's company.
Yeah, I think nowadays everything's on your phone. So actually, and then you've got that notes and that information directly. So you can record. I've been in meetings where people have recorded them off their phones.
Oh, good.
It's not a bad thing to say, you know, this is why you've got to remember this reasonable adjustment isn't costing anybody anything, is it? So there's nothing worrying about that. There's no shame in asking for that. And you should feel comfortable in doing that, because there'll be a host of reasons why other people would want to record that information as well. So sometimes people don't talk about their disabilities, but they are there. And the rule is, you know, an adjustment for one helps everyone, doesn't it?
That's it. Well, thank you so much, Joanna and Taylor. And I'm really sorry if we haven't had time to answer everybody's questions, but I think we could go on for hours with this topic. But if you've got any questions that you still want to ask, just email them into us at Different Strokes and we will do our best to answer them, or get in touch with Taylor and Joanna and get back to you. When we stop the webinar, there'll be a very quick feedback survey to fill out. Only take you 2 minutes to fill out, and we would appreciate that greatly. And our next webinar is going to be at the end of October, and it has been sponsored by Odstock Medical UK, who are the UK's leading provider of functional electrical stimulation, that's quite a mouthful to say, devices and clinical treatment. So that will be very interesting. So keep an eye on the website and social media for when the tickets or the sign up for that webinar will go live. But once again, thanks so much to Joanna and Taylor, and I hope you've all enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.